So welcome to Coffee with Kupke, a podcast of the Diocese of Paterson. My name is Father Paul Manning. I am the vicar for Evangelization for the Diocese of Paterson. I'm sitting here with our diocesan archivist and a professor from Immaculate Conception Seminary, Monsignor Ray Kupke. And we are drinking coffee. At least we're claiming this is coffee. It's actually decaf coffee tonight. I was kind of tempted to make it Irish coffee without telling Monsignor Kupke, but I thought that would not be a good idea. So welcome to Coffee with Kupke. I'm going to take a sip.
He goes with this every time.
You don't want to take a sip? Okay. So Monsignor Kupke is the famous author of a large tome that recounts the history of Catholicism in the Diocese of Paterson. It's called Living Stones. We've been walking through Living Stones in our podcast, and we're in the 10th chapter, and I think we probably have 2 more sessions before the book is completed, and we move on to the next part of the history of the diocese, which Father Ray says is the dirt under the stone. But in any case, every now and then we step out of the narrative of Living Stones to do a couple of sessions on what we call Weird Diocese of Paterson. And so tonight we're doing an episode of Weird Diocese of Paterson. So the plan tonight is to probably talk about things for about 40 to 45 minutes and then to open it up to questions. And so
We're going to talk that long?
Yeah. You don't think you think you're going to have a problem with that?
No.
Well, usually at 20 or 25 minutes, I'm trying to cut Monsignor Kupke off, and he just keeps on going. And I try and give him the clue that we're wrapping up, and then he goes into the next thread.
He especially does not like it when I do shout-outs to people.
Oh, do you want to do shout-outs? Do you have any shout-outs tonight?
No, I know you don't like them.
Okay. All right, so
one of the dividends of this whole thing is that I've heard from people from all over the country.
Yes, and from all over the world, actually.
Right,
Yeah.
but from strange pieces of my past and your past.
Yeah, they found us.
They found us where we're live.
Yeah. So the Weird Diocese of Paterson scares me a little bit because I don't know what he's going to talk about. I usually have notes and questions and try and manage things, but he's got notes over there and I have no idea exactly what he's going to talk about, although I have a vague sense of some of the topics. So I'm going to start, Monsignor Kupke, by throwing a curveball at you.
Again?
And I'm going to ask you if you have ever heard of an author that wrote one of my favorite books that I read in my early youth, Ernest Thompson Seton.
Sure.
I knew he would know it. So
Ernest Thompson Seton was a major player in the foundation of the Boy Scouts of America.
He lived at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. He was a naturalist, an artist, an author, and was foundational in the beginning of the Boy Scouts.
Basically, there are 3 men that were key in the founding of the Boy Scouts of America, and Thompson Seton was kind of like the not the organizational, but he was the input. He was the guy that put the spirit into the organization. He was, if I remember, they created a special title for him, the official outdoorsman or the official woodsman of the movement.
Yeah. And Monsignor Kupke, why do you know about the Boy Scouts?
I was a Boy Scout.
You were, and involved with the Boy Scouts for much of your life, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So the reason I bring up Ernest Thompson Seton is because I read in my early youth a book that he wrote called Wild Animals I Have Known. Wild Animals I Have Known. And in that book, he has multiple chapters on different wild animals, wolves and squirrels and rabbits, etc. And so we're not going to talk about wild animals that, well, maybe we are, but we're going to talk about pets.
Yeah. So the first segment of Weird Paterson Diocese, we thought we would do something on the history of priests and their pets.
Wild animals we have known.
Right, and the wild animals are the priests. The pets were pretty...
That's good.
I was telling Father Paul that in the Camden Diocese, there is a pastor that has a service dog. And the service dog basically is able to sniff out when his insulin has dropped to a bad level. But, you know, that part is lovely. The crazy part is that he brings this dog to everything. And the dog is much better behaved than most of the Camden clergy. You know, the dog comes to ordinations in procession, wearing his little vestment. And, you know, you just get used to him after a while, but he sits there, and meanwhile, you know, there's little gossip going on, a little buzzing here and there.
Oh, yeah, priests are pretty...
The dog is sitting there with his hands folded and stuff.
I believe they're paws, but that's okay. In any case, so...
So we've had a few of those. You know, if you go back far enough, we think of pets, you know, dogs and cats, maybe a bird here and there, but if you go far enough back in diocesan history, it's not dogs and cats, it's horses, because this was the way of transportation. We actually have a annual budget for one of our parishes from the 1890s, and the second largest thing in the budget is feed for the pastor's horse.
Wow. And what year is this?
1894, yeah. So our earliest pet picture in the archives is from 1882, and it's from St. Anthony's School in Butler. And they had a picture of the entire school all gathered together. You know, we have some great shots. And the pastor, Father Francis Koch, was off on one of his many begging tours somewhere or other.
We talked about him in one of the
Right.
episodes. He was a great fundraiser.
Fundraiser, yeah. He would much rather be off raising funds than appearing in a picture with a bunch of school kids. But anyway, so the kids apparently, you know, this is one of those urban legends that comes down. The kids apparently asked if he was not going to be there, could his horse at least be in the photo? So the horse's name was Katie. Katie. So in this photograph, we have a whole school full of kids, you know, maybe 150 children. And then over to the right is his groomsman in a derby hat with Katie, you know, standing looking into the picture. So this is the earliest pet picture that we have.
Wow.
We have another one from the turn of the century. The pastor here in Morristown in Assumption, who this building was partially named after, Monsignor Ellard.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
He apparently likes to take constitutionals on his horse around Morristown. So we have a great shot of him in a high hat, vest, you know, the whole going out on Sunday afternoon, you know, kind of outfit, but sitting on top of the horse. You know, it's an enormous picture. But this would have been pets from the turn of the century.
Do you remember Monsignor Ellard's horse's name?
No.
Okay.
We don't have that piece.
Yeah.
But then when we move, you know, further in, we have some wild dog stories. For some reason, priests do not warm up to cats. We have no cat stories, no pictures of cats.
I'm going to tell. Well, I'm going to ask you after we finish with the dogs about Elso Introini's a cat guy.
Oh, well, there's always one.
Yeah, okay, sorry. But go with the dogs. Go with the dogs.
So we have a couple of them, over the course of the years. And DePaul High School, where Father Frank is from,
Father Frank Lenny's here in the back, chaplain of DePaul High School.
Their founding priest, Monsignor John McHugh, had a red Irish wolfhound, I guess, whom he took with him to everything. And so he almost became the symbol, if you will, of the school, because every photo we have of McHugh at a football game or almost anything, there's this great big dog,
And Monsignor John P. McHugh
right,
is one of the reasons why we have so many Irish clergy in our diocese.
Yes, he was the first one to come over, and
a steady stream came
after
at
him.
his invitation.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we have Father Joe Mullen, who was a parochial vicar in St. Philip's in Clifton. This would be in the 60s, and he had a small little dog as a pet, but
How small was the dog?
Small enough that nobody who lived in the house with him knew that he had this dog. That's the good part. The pastor would not have approved of this at all, but Mullen loved his dog. So for 2.5 years, he had the dog in his room without anybody knowing that this was there. So this is another, priestly pet story.
Yeah. Was it like a Chihuahua or something? Or?
I don't know. I didn't see it.
No one saw him. No one ever knew. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Possibly the worst one was, again, here in Morristown. Morristown's kind of a center of eccentricity in the diocese.
The center of eccentricity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Father Hernan Arias, who was the pastor for many years at St. Margaret's in Morristown, his dog had a column in the parish bulletin.
I forgot that. He's my classmate. I forgot that.
So in addition to his column, the dog also got to write occasionally and sign little paw prints.
And what did the dog say? Do you remember? Like what he would talk about? Or
I think he basically said whatever Father Arias really wanted to say, but
was afraid to say. Yeah.
I think he basically used the dog as a front for what
to say what he needed to.
To say what he needed to, yeah.
Interesting.
Our bishops, by and large, have not had pets,
except for Bishop
Rodimer, our sixth bishop. He had a dog, which, you knew this was not going to play out well, because he decided to name his dog after the first bishop. So the first bishop of Paterson, Thomas McLaughlin, was a Germanophobe. He had been educated in
Germanic,
in Austria, and loved all things German. He was so into German things that during the Second World War, he got visited by the government about the amount of mail going back and forth
from Germany
to Germany.
Yeah.
So among the clergy, his nickname was Schlitz.
So the bishop's nickname was Schlitz.
So he didn't know that,
Yeah.
In his mind, his nickname was Excellency. But among the clergy, when he wasn't there, he was Schlitz.
Yeah.
So when Rodimer got a dog, he names the dog Schlitz.
All right, so can I just ask, first of all, Bishop Rodimer was around with McLaughlin or no?
He was a seminarian.
And so he knew the nickname.
He knew the nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Schlitz was also the name of a beer, wasn't it?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. A cheap beer that my father drank.
The beer that made Milwaukee famous or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Anyway, so Bishop Rodimer names the dog Schlitz.
Right. But unfortunately, while the dog was faithful, Bishop Erdeimer had two priest secretaries who were not so good, Monsignor Hunt and Monsignor Hart, and they kept letting the dog out. You know, they would open the door for some reason and the dog would take off like a, you know, and then they would have to run out into the streets of Paterson chasing the dog.
Yelling, Schlitz, Schlitz.
Yes, yeah.
And the beer truck would come over.
And finally, one day, Schlitz got out, and he just never came back. And that was the end of pets for bishops in the Diocese of Paterson.
Well, Monsignor John Hart, for reconciliation on search weekends, actually, Monsignor Kupke would preach a homily about Schlitz running away and going to find Schlitz. I think he compared it to the shepherd who goes to find the lost sheep. And so Schlitz appeared in multiple
trying to put a nice cover on the fact that he could not keep this dog in the house.
Yeah. But didn't Bishop Erdeimer have another dog after Schlitz?
Were there two Schlitzes?
No, I think it was a different name, but yeah. Well, that'll be the next episode of Weird Diocese of Paterson.
But now this has not ended. We have one pastor now who should be retired, but doesn't want to retire because he's negotiating with Bishop Sweeney to be allowed to bring his dog into Nazareth Village, where there's a no pets rule. So this has gone on right down to the present day. Possibly the wildest, though. Father John Hewitson, who may have the prize for being one of our most eccentric. But, you know, when everybody else had a dog, he had a 100-year-old parrot.
100 years?
Parrots live forever, apparently.
Who knew that? Who knew that?
And the parrot's repertoire was not in keeping with a priest, you know.
You know, Monsignor Flanagan tells us about that parrot. Yeah, that he would say bad
because
things.
Kevin was his associate in Mendham.
Yeah. All right. So
he was not such a good parrot.
Yeah.
Or maybe he actually was. He parroted whatever Hewitson said.
All right. So Brian Hansberger, who works here at the Center for Evangelization, we talk about episodes every now and then. And Brian says that Monsignor Kupke says things on Coffee with Kupke that other priests normally would not say. Like, you know, your filter's a little light on the filter.
You've been telling me that for years.
Yeah. So you're not going to tell us who the guy who's negotiating with Bishop Sweeney is right now?
No, I wouldn't
darn
do
it.
that.
Okay. Did you ever have a pet?
No.
Did you ever wish for a pet?
Oh, as a young kid, I did dog.
Yeah, but not as a priest.
No, too much trouble.
Yeah. I know,
You got to take care of it. You know,
I know, it's not much of a life for the dog.
No.
Yeah, because you're on the, you know, you're busy and you can't pay a lot of attention to the dog.
Yeah.
I had sea monkeys for quite a while.
You're going to get no help from me on this one.
They don't take a lot of effort. Okay, so let's move to a different weird topic.
All right.
In the late 1970s, John Goodman, the actor, was in a movie.
Trains, Boats, and Planes or something.
No, that was John Candy.
John Candy.
This was a movie about John Goodman was the villain, but he was living in an English house, and there were little people who were taking things out of the house to utilize for their little situation. They were living in the walls, and the name of the movie, anybody in the studio audience, you're too young maybe?
Borrowers?
The Borrowers. The Borrowers. Does that trigger anything?
Well, we had talked about doing a weird Paterson segment on Stuff in the diocese that has moved from one church to another
Stuff that has been borrowed.
or stolen.
All right, so can you do that? Am I putting you on the spot?
No, I have a whole...
I'm shocked.
I have a whole list here. This list, depends on a couple of things. A group of priests who are cheap by nature and do not want to buy anything new.
I don't know any of those.
No. So that produces a whole. And then there's another group who just want stuff that somebody else has. We call it theft in other parts of the world. But among the priests, it's just borrowing, right?
Yeah. Are you going to give names?
Well, we can give some names.
If they're dead. He'll tell us if they're dead.
So we start out with St. Paul inside the walls.
What? That would be here.
That would be here. So if you go downstairs in the chapel, there's one little stained glass window in the chapel over the fireplace. That was originally in the old St. Margaret's Church in Morristown and was donated by the pastor at the time when Father Gino was putting up this place. So that's a relatively...
That's an innocuous, yeah.
Yeah. It moved, but there was no theft.
It was voluntary.
Yeah, it was voluntary.
Yeah. It was generosity.
Yeah. St. Pius X in Montville. Lovely parish, I spent some of the best years of my life there. The name itself was picked because the founding pastor, Father Joe Myers, who was very, very scrupulous with spending money, he knew where he could get a statue of St. Pius X for free. So when the bishop asked him, at one point it was just the Montville mission. Actually, at one point it was the Tawako mission.
And it was a mission of which parish?
It was independent. Bishop McNulty was fond of establishing what he called exploratory missions. So he would take a priest, send him out to an area and say, go see if there's anything worth doing there. They didn't all, but most of them did. So when it was time to take this, after a year, it looked like this was going to take off. So they asked Joe Meyer what he wanted, if he had any choice about naming the new parish. So he thought to himself, and he knew that back in his previous assignment in Our Lady of Victories in Paterson, they had a statue of St. Pius X. And he thought to himself, they'll give it to me. So he says to Bishop McNulty, I'm thinking of St. Pius X. And Pius had been canonized a couple of years earlier. He was on people's radar. So sure enough, that statue is today in the school hall, the school lobby of St. Pius's, and the whole name is, they didn't buy a statue because of the name. The whole parish was named because of this free statue.
So did Joe Myers have to go to the pastor and say, will you give me the statue?
Yeah. And he did.
Yeah. Wow.
In Our Lady of Victories at that point, they were combining two churches. There was a Latino mission in Paterson, Our Lady of Providence, and the church was falling down. So they were combining, melding the two into one parish. So they had extra statues, and Joe knew this whole story. And however, that's not the end of Joe Meyer as a what would we call it? Not a thief, borrower.
But a borrower. Yeah.
So if you go to St. Pius today, the pews do not fit in the church. No. There is a clear outline on the floor for how much space the pews should take. And they extend over that space on each end. To go down the side aisle in St. Pius Church is
You have to walk sideways.
sideways, practically.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not for the hefty, because the pews are older than the church. The pews are the original pews from the old St. Brendan's in Clifton, which had been closed shortly after St. Pius X was opened, and the new current church was being built in Clifton, St. Brendan's. So Joe Meyer knew that they had a basement full of unused pews that,
He got for St. Pius. Yeah.
he made them work. They don't actually work, they're too wide, but he made them work, and they've been there ever since. And but those pews, pews are some of the most durable things in Catholicism. Priests come and go, but pews, they really are solid.
We have a couple of pews in the hallway over in the school building.
Yeah.
I forget where they came from, but yeah. Father Ray, isn't there like a store in Newark or like a place?
Today, this whole segment would be done away with, because today, as we close and merge churches, there's actually a warehousing of materials from closed churches which can be used in other churches. For example, when Father George Hunt renovated St. Vincent's here in Madison, that whole back marble piece was
From someplace else?
someplace else.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You go to the old church store and you buy. The biggest in New Jersey, it's not in our diocese, but we can throw it in.
Yeah.
Sacred Heart in Vailsburg, Newark, which was the biggest parish church in the state. It seated 2,500 people.
And Monsignor Kupke, can I tell you, my aunt was the secretary there at Sacred Heart in Vailsburg.
You'll always have an angle. So that church is now, because of demographics in that part of Newark, that church has been closed for a number of years. But the entire marble back altar is now in Leesburg, Virginia,
Wow.
in a brand new parish, brand new church. So
It's good to know we do that.
yeah. You can, if you visit St. Dominic's in Bricktown, the marble in that church was all moved down the Garden State Parkway from Holy Spirit in Asbury Park. It just lifted the entire innards of that church, the altar rail, the side altars, the back reredos and everything, and just put it into the church in Bricktown. So today it's almost a pathway of honor to repurpose church stuff. However, it was not always that way. And perhaps the most infamous borrowing.
I was just going to ask him for the most scandalous story.
Scandalous. Yeah. We always want scandal. Again, Morristown is kind of the center of eccentricity.
There we go.
St. Margaret's in Morristown, which is dedicated to the Queen of Scotland, St. Margaret of Scotland. Hence, all the streets in that neighborhood all have Irish and Scottish names, Iona Street and all of that. So they have a statue of St. Margaret, Queen of Scotland, their patron, which originally was in St. Vincent de Paul's Church in Sterling, in Lower Morris County.
Not far from here.
Not far from here. Their old church, not their current church, but their old wood church. And the legend is that the statue moved from Sterling to Morristown, as a result of a wild poker game one night.
I was going to guess poker.
Yes, in which the stakes
Got very high.
they not only got high, they got weird. The pastor in Morristown had had his eye on this statue for a while.
Can you name the pastor?
Chris Haig.
Monsignor Christian Haig.
Yeah, he wasn't Monsignor for this thing.
Oh. He most made a Monsignor after the coup. Yeah.
But so, the legend is that he engineered this poker game and won.
And he was playing against.
We won't talk about that.
Okay.
And Chris did not drive. This is the other part of it. So he immediately dispatched his parochial vicar while he still had the other pastor in a chair at the poker table. He sent his parochial vicar from Morristown down to Sterling to break into the church, grab the statue, and bring it back up to Morristown. So
crazy.
Yes, yeah.
Joe, how are we doing on time?
You're about 30 minutes in.
Okay. How are you all doing out there? All right. Do you have any? Do we want to move to the next topic, or do you have some more? Do you have some more?
I have more, but
well, I think maybe one more in this category.
One more in this category. It's probably the weirdest, I suppose. In the late 1950s, Father Leo Lambert, who was the parochial
Sucasana?
vicar, please let me finish this.
Okay, sorry.
He was the parochial vicar at St. Teresa's in Paterson, over by the bishop's house on the east side of, and they still had their original church standing, which was a butler building,
Like World War II era?
World War II,
Yeah.
Collapsible building. So he was made the founding pastor of a new parish in Roxbury Township. And it was also named St. Teresa. The legend about the naming is that a woman had complained to Bishop McNulty about the fact that so few women saints had churches named after them in the diocese. They said, she said, you got all these Virgin Mary churches, and then that's it. It's like St. Margaret, St. Agnes, and so McNulty thought about this apparently, and the next three churches were St. Rose in East Hanover, St. Teresa's in Sucasana, and St. Catherine's in Mountain Lakes, three women, one after another. But he appointed Leo Lambert the founding pastor of the church in Sucasana. So Leo goes to his pastor in Paterson and asks to have the church. He took the entire building, collapsed it, put it on a flatbed truck, and took the entire church up to Sucasana and reconstructed it. And I think we have some old Sucasanas.
We got married in that church.
So I grew up in Ironia. Leo Lambert was still the pastor there, and we went to that church on occasion as well. And when was the new St. Teresa's built?
In
80s,
the
maybe?
1980s, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Chris was baptized in that church in 1985. But
Yeah.
he was like one of the first babies baptized.
Yeah, St. Teresa's.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one thing, even in a poker game, to take a statue, but to take an entire church building and move.
That is one generous pastor.
Yeah.
Now, we have the Hermitage in Chester,
Yes.
right? And
Bethlehem and
yeah,
also
Bethlehem,
and
but
then the Carmelites.
wasn't Monsignor Lopeteski really good at repurposing things?
Father Romano was.
Maybe say a little bit about that.
Gene Romano, who founded the Bethlehem Hermitages in Chester.
So Father Romano was a diocesan priest who felt a call to establish a hermitage and enter into the eremitical life, got permission And so he was given land in Chester, or did he get that
A
land
Christmas
himself?
tree farm.
It was a Christmas tree farm
Yes.
that became the Hermitage.
Right.
But he
That's part of the reason it's Bethlehem.
because of the Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of that artwork there is from other places.
Right. Gene was the type of person that if he liked something, he would talk you into giving it to him. By the time he got done with all his pious platitudes, all of a sudden you didn't have whatever it was you went to.
Well, for a hermit,
Yes,
a hermit, he was talkative.
yeah.
I mean, you would go on retreat, and he'd say, a silent retreat for 5 days, and he would say, "I want to have a conference with you," and you'd go in, and you never got a
hours
word in
later.
edgewise.
I once found myself on retreat with Gene at St. Joseph's Trappist Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts, in southern Massachusetts, up by Worcester. And he asked me if I could give him a ride home at the end of the week. And we got in the car, and I didn't get my first word in until we were crossing the Tappan Zee Bridge.
Well, he had a lot of pent-up words.
Well, one of my friends said, "I've never met a hermit who doesn't like to talk."
That's true.
They're catching up for last time.
Yeah.
But Gene was very good at collecting. Gene had an eye for things, and he also had an eye for how he might use them in his place. So sometimes he collected more than he needed, but an example of that in Father Paul's life, actually, if you go to St. Matthew's Church in Ironia, in their vestibule, they have a beautiful kind of pietà, carved wooden, which is actually the 12th station of the cross from some German church in Manhattan. It's an enormous thing. When you think of this as just the Station of the Cross, it gives you an idea of the size of the church.
Yeah.
But basically, when they opened the church in Ironia, Gene gave them this as a gift from his collection of stuff that he had somewhere on that property.
Yeah, and it's hand-carved, wooden,
Hand-carved,
beautiful. Yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
piece.
stunning. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Please join us next time as we conclude our session of Coffee with Kupke Live.